Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Reconnect with Plant Wisdom. It's me, Tigria Gardenia. I am so looking forward to having you hear this conversation. So, complete one of those inex- inexplicable synchronicities led me to Eleanor O'Hanlon, who is a writer, a conservationist. She is a human being with a deep passion for the natural world, for that sort of inner and spiritual dimension of the relationship with wild animals and wild plants, and basically wild nature within yourself as well as outside of herself. She has so much to share about that connection that happens when you truly see other kin as, I don't even know the right words because it's one of those experiences that doesn't have words. The best I can do is say, listen to the episode, because this is a amazing journey that she's had of close encounters with whales, with wolves, with polar bears, with brown bears, with wild horses, with so many beings. And nothing I could say will ever explain what she so beautifully shares with you through her energy and her words. So you're in for a real treat. This is episode 113, Meeting the Gaze of a Wild Being. Welcome to Reconnect with Plant Wisdom. I'm your host, Tigria Gardenia, nature-inspired mentor, certified life coach, and the founder of the Naturally Conscious community. For over a decade, I've been known as a world ambassador for plant advocacy, working closely with plants to share their practical wisdom to help you consciously embody the elements of life that nourish your evolution. In this podcast, I delve into ancient and modern knowledge from biology to spirituality about the wondrous ways of plants. Together, we'll explore how ecosystem thinking helps you overcome limiting beliefs, understand the true nature of relationships, and live an authentic, impactful life. Eleanor, you have been a pure discovery, because the truth of the matter is that I actually met you through your husband, who I'm taking a class with, which I'm loving completely, reconnecting to my Kabbalistic roots and my, the Hebrew letters in a completely different way. And then I discover, after I have already done 8 classes with him,
Yeah.
that it's like, yeah, but wait, it's my wife that is the person that is connected to nature. And I was like, excuse me? So please, before we start getting into a conversation that I know is going to be beautiful and deep and wide and so moving, tell everybody, who is Eleanor O'Hanlon?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is that my entire life I have been a lover of the natural world, and that's something that goes right back to childhood. Back to being a child in the west of Ireland, growing up on a farm, growing up with animals, in that presence of some beautiful awareness of the presence in nature. I was born into that. And I think there's a part of you in childhood that is actually carrying that light. And then you spend, as an adult, you spend so much time trying to find a way to be that light in the world that we inhabit. And that's not an easy task. So a lover of nature, and I would say especially wild nature. In other words, the free living, self-determining aspect of the natural world, that embodiment of the coherent intelligence of all life. And I go to the wild animals, the wild plants, the wild places to learn, to be taught and to be reawakened to that vast intelligence. Yeah.
I I love the peacefulness that you exude as you say that. And I feel like that lately I've been having these conversations with people, and we're talking about everything from times of Atlantis and Lemuria. And we've been talking also in class with, your husband and you about, how the letters sort of touch us and enter into who we are to help us really see the world around us. And I feel like that piece that humanity keeps missing, that is the fact that the more we separate out from kin, the more we separate out from the natural world, the more we stop identifying ourselves as beings of nature,
Mm,
the more chaotic and hectic and depressive and frenetic
mm,
our world becomes.
mm,
And so I find this all over the place with all the people that really are not connecting with their mind, but are just
mm.
like have remembered and reawakened to the fact that they're beings of nature. I find that there's this peace. It could still come with lots of enthusiasm like mine comes, but it's still
Mm,
peace. Like there's this trust in the world. And I'd love to hear more about kind of, because you've done some pretty amazing things as
mhm,
this. I mean, you've worked, if I remember, with Greenpeace, like you've
mm,
used this, let me say it a better way. You followed your connection into
mm.
many different paths. Talk to us about one. Like give me just one of them.
Just one. Gosh, part of my soul lives in the north, right? In the high
Mhm.
north, in the Arctic. And I go back even to childhood again. We had dogs at home, and I had, as an 8, 9-year-old child, I had this like feeling, but they should be pulling things, right? They're supposed to be and I even tried to make, traces, the actual leather harness, and to make them pull something, because in my mind I was fascinated by the North. And so the first time, and it was in Russia, I was working in Russia, and for about 10 years, actually. I started going in the early 90s. And then up until, yeah, about 15 years, actually, up until about 2004, I went there regularly, because I was connected with a whole network of really quite extraordinary Russian biologists. So the first time that I saw the tundra, I felt this sense of joy that I couldn't understand. Why do I feel this spaciousness and expansiveness of being that is bringing me so much joy? And that journey, which became an expedition, two expeditions actually, around the northeastern corner of Arctic Siberia on the Bering Strait. So, if you can imagine, you have Alaska and you have the Arctic Siberian coast, and they're almost meeting. I mean, they are fundamentally a single ecosystem, divided by political lines. And so, this high Arctic ecosystem, I traveled there in a skin boat for some of the time. So, the traditional craft of the Yupik people of Siberia, that part of Siberia, they actually live on both sides of Bering Strait. So, I was in a skin boat, a walrus skin boat. In other words, you're enfolded in the consciousness of the animal being who has given his or her, life to carry you across the ocean. And we were surrounded by gray whales, because that's where they feed. They come on this huge journey, and it takes them from the coast of Mexico right up into Arctic waters. It's a journey they make twice a year for summer feeding, and then back south. And the gray whales were feeding, in these shallow waters, and then they would come up to breathe. Because we were in a skin boat, they came up right alongside us. And it was the first time that I had realized that through the whales, the sea is breathing. The ocean is breathing through the whales. And we also know the ocean is singing through the whales. And the ocean is also being regenerated through the whales. But in that moment of hearing that pulse of breath, it took me, it was like over a barrier in myself and into that the living world. The one that is not an abstraction or a concept or a theory of ecology, much as I love ecology, by the way, but a breathing aliveness that is conscious in its own extraordinary way. And I've said ever since my life changed, the moment I heard the breathing of the whale and felt it, you also feel it inside, because it actually resonates inside you. And my life changed, and I couldn't go back to the way I was before. I mean, I'd always seen for several years, I've been working in quite hard areas of conservation, like the wildlife trade, and learning too much about probably the negativity. And that was that shift that I wasn't going to stay in the problem anymore. It was a shift into working with life and for life, beyond these dualities of human and animal and domestic and wild. And um, yeah.
I absolutely love that sentence, the idea of like shifting into life. And I
Mhm,
empathize with that so much. And I think people, for you it came in the tundra, right? And
mhm,
I think people mistaken the idea that that has to come in some like extreme type of
mhm,
situation. I felt that the first time after my plan of reawakening, the
mhm,
first time I took a long walk in, just a local wooded area.
mhm.
And I remember feeling that and then bringing that feeling into a city. I remember the first time I
Okay.
was walking around, I think I was in Miami Beach or something, and I was
Mm,
doing this project called the Orienting of the Trees that we do here in Damanhur, which is a sort of mutual reawakening to the connection between
mm,
us and the plant world. And I remember I was doing it in, busy city, but I was
mm,
walking around these trees in front of these businesses, and I was thinking to myself, these trees are holding the energy for everything that's happening in these businesses. These trees and all the little tiny plants like the dandelions and little
mm,
purslanes and all the
mm,
little weeds that are growing on the ground, these wild plants are holding space for the madness of disconnection that's happening for so many. And like you said, it sort of it shifts you into compassion. It
mm,
shifts you into generosity. It
mm,
shifts you into a holding of a space in a
mm,
very different way. That doesn't mean you don't get pissed off when you see certain things, but it's still different. And I can imagine that being there in that natural setting, but also with natural conditions. You weren't on a like giant freighter boat of some sort, like you said, you were in the being that had given their life for you to be able to do this, and you were recognizing that. And I could just imagine how different that small shift, which is really a gigantic shift, must be. How did you bring that back into your life? Like, what did you find that
yeah.
changed for you once you were kind of out of that environment and back into this quote unquote normal world?
It's it's so true what you've just said. No matter where you are, no matter where you are, the plants are the whole, green world is always present, and which means the birds are present, and the insects are present, and the underground mycelial networks are present. And but in this particular, from this personal story, so I was a month, on this journey, um, sleeping on the tundra in tents and very exposed, obviously, and sometimes dangerously exposed in a way, although. And so I came back, and I came back to the middle of London, right? So it was a bit of a shock at first.
I can
But
imagine.
what you've just described, so I was walking up just to do the shopping, and I saw this tree, and this was autumn, right? When the trees are showing, the fire within the green, right?
Hmm.
And I looked at this tree, and I sat down. In London, you have these walls outside some of the houses. I sat down and I looked at this tree, and I went, this is no exaggeration. I went into a state of rapture
Hmm.
because the energy was, of course, there are changes in quality, but there wasn't a difference. The tree was showing me was actually resonating back that what you have experienced with that at that level of intensity is here right now in the tree, that the being of the tree. And it was very amazing because I didn't see a tree as thing. I saw it as a leaping flame, right? A flame of that was always, you know exactly what I mean when
I
you
know
see the
exactly what
inner.
you mean.
It's like rooted and leaping this flame, and that was just, yeah.
And
Mm.
it's interesting that you just said that because, I do a lot of activities with people. I try to take them kind of out of their traditional sort of verbal headspace and really bring
Yeah.
them into their inner plantness. And one of the ways is to help them recognize that any being they're seeing, whether that's the
Yeah.
house cat or, the dog from down the street, or whether it's a house plant, all have their own way of expressing themselves. They could be very
Mm.
small, very big, they could be fiery, can be anything. And
Mhm.
kind of stepping out of our human world is about letting that sort of definition and label sort of drop in order to be able to see this. And I see this especially, it's I find it so fascinating when, like you said, you give yourself that moment to stop in a big city
Mm.
and you
Mm.
recognize that the tree that's been sitting in front of the church or in this park or even just kind of in the middle of a square with children playing around and covered up to, the roots all covered in concrete. And yet that tree still has that spirit and is waiting for that recognition. Like the moment you sit in that rapture, you don't
Mm.
just admire like a, I don't know, rock star sitting on a stage with 20,000 people in the audience, but
Mm.
more of that you can immediately feel when the plant knows, and the animal also, but the plant knows they're being seen. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh, welcome.
Exactly.
Like, and
Exactly.
you're here, you're present, you've entered
Yeah.
into this plantness connection,
Exactly.
my essence to your essence. And
Mm.
let me let you in.
Mm.
Come, have a chat with
Mm.
me. And it's this
Mm.
beautiful, you've said it as, I'm quoting you because it's so perfect. Meeting the gaze of a wild being in mutual recognition.
Mm. Yeah.
Oh, poetry. Tell me more. Tell me more.
I love to. I love to. This is just, I mean, this is my passion, and I feel so blessed in this, right? Because, and I work mostly with animals, right? But which doesn't mean that I don't have very, very great love for the plant, the plant, the kingdom of plant life. Um, so before I go on to that gaze with a wild, free living animal, where there's this mutual flow of understanding. I just wanted one story. Can I tell you one story about trees, right?
Please, please.
Yeah.
We
So
love stories.
this, I love stories. Stories are how truth kind of sparkles, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. That's a perfect way of saying it. Where truth
Mm,
sparkles. I love it.
yeah. So I was I was working on a project in a region in the Caucasus in Georgia, right? So you have these Caucasus Mountains that and then Georgia is like the country that goes from the Black Sea right up to the peaks of the Caucasus Mountains. So I was working on this project there, and it involved going up to through a very ancient beech forest. And then, so these trees were, 4, 5, 600 years old. And in the side of the mountain, there were many waterfalls just flowing down and filling pools. And it was springtime, it was around now, and there was such a vivid, vibrant, green awakening, and then this was and the flow of wild water with the trees. So the trees and the water were in this beautiful resonance together, and as you can imagine, that was really it was just, yeah, I was enchanted. And so I came back to London, right, middle of the city, having been with these ancient trees in the Caucasus. And I used to go for a walk on Hampstead Heath, which is a beautiful, very large park at the north of the city. And in Hampstead Heath, there is an alley of beech trees. And I knew these trees. I used to go walking there. And so after I came back from being with this incredible community of ancient beech trees, I was approaching this alley of beech trees, and I felt this change, right, in the energetic atmosphere. And I walked in among the trees, and then I realized that they were sensing where I'd been, right? And they really wanted to commune with their fellow trees through what I'd experienced. In other words, that I could, within my consciousness, I could open my consciousness and be a bridge between the world of the trees on Hampstead Heath, who are always with humans in that, beautiful way that they have, and those trees on on the slopes of, you know, uh, this area called Lagodechi, which is like so high up in the mountains. And so there was this meeting, and it was unmistakable. And you know what I mean? You know when something is unmistakable because your being changes,
Mhm.
right? And you're no longer caught up in any thoughts. You're just feeling this beautiful, amazing presence that is so sensitive. And you realize then how sensitive they are to the humans
Yeah, and this
as
is
well as each other. Yeah.
absolutely, and this is the thing about being a bridge species, right? We,
Yeah.
as human beings, are a bridge species, as are whales, as
Mhm.
are many other species, and we can when we really bring that in, we hold that within us,
Yeah.
right? And we can help mediate. Trees can also be mediators of certain things, and we can be mediators. I think,
Yeah.
again, going back to that part of recognizing that we are beings of nature, and that connection happens at so many different levels, and that when that connection sort of marks us, it marks our soul, it marks our subtle body, as our subtle
Mhm.
bodies interact and tap and touch, these other species. The other species could then feel that, like, oh, you've been with my kin, like, how was
Exactly.
that? You
Exactly.
and especially
Isn't that
beaches,
amazing?
really like to be amongst beaches. I mean, anybody who knows and has spent any time with beaches knows that if you have a forest and a beech tree starts to grow, pretty soon all of them are gonna be beech
They're
trees.
all gonna be there.
Beach
Yes.
beach tree's sort of like, get out of my way. I need space, and I have a cousin and the, friend of a friend's, and like this one over here who's also, yeah, we're gonna call them cousin too, and a brother and a sister and an uncle and a queen, like they're amazing in that way of just taking up space.
Oh, if they just wanna be with beech trees. Just
Exactly. So I can completely see how, having a beech tree recognize like, "Oh, you've been touched by my kind. Come share your stories. Sit down with us
totally,
and have some
totally. And we wanna know
beers. We wanna know
what did it
more."
feel like? Well,
I
oh,
love
you mean they have all this water and it's cascading down the sides of the mountain and
Yeah, and that's exactly how it is, and it's such a I mean, it's so much even better for us. As you're saying all these as you're telling these stories, which, as you said, they're those sparkles of truth. I think we forget how magical this world is. Like, we get
Oh,
so
so
caught up
true,
in
so true.
the things that are happening. I mean, one of the reasons I was attracted to, for example, your husband's work was because I've studied Kabbalah for so many years, and then I came here to Damanhur and have been able to because for me, Kabbalah is the way everything relating to Kabbalistic world view is passed a long time ago from being mental, and it really just immersed itself in my body. So it's been
Yeah.
actually a long time since I've studied, quote unquote,
Mhm.
because I just acquire pieces and they continue into my integration. But one of the things that I've been trying to do with all my practices, whether my work with plants, because it's naturally happening with plants, is to move into this more kind of mystical, experiential piece. I'm kind of a colleague of mine said it to me the other day, which was, she says, with all of the AI world and with everything that we have with the internet, the need for raw knowledge is whenever I
Mm.
need it, I can easily find it. So instead, what I need to do is, how do I integrate that knowledge? That's going to be the evolution of humanity. Is we no longer need to memorize, book texts, because the books are ask a question and Google will give you not just a series of websites, but also now an AI generated
Mhm.
response, right? So
Mm.
I can get the knowledge from anywhere. The real power, and not power, but the real kind of evolutive step we need to take is the use of that knowledge and the integration. And for me, I've reached the point, and which is what I love to do with my students and my clients, is how do you embody it? How does
Mm.
it become a part of your life? Because for me, the plants did that. The plants opened that door for me in a way that I could have never even expected. And that was the reason why, I'm looking for more mystical answers. I want to sit with what I have in me, and I want to move my body and feel it coming into my body. And I feel like a lot of what you're talking about also is a recognition that comes from, one, allowing myself to gaze, which we don't always give ourselves time to, are like eye to eye. And when I say eye to eye, I don't just mean physical eye, but like eye as in opened viewing, which can happen, eye to eye in a physical way with an animal, but it can also happen in a much more open-minded, mystical way with any being of any physiology. And so I feel like there's that gazing that says, I give myself space to be in your presence, to see you fully. If you are will allow me, can you please show yourself to me? Like, tell
Beautiful.
me show me who you really are. Let me
Beautiful.
feel the full impact of your full aura, or subtle body or physical body, or whatever you want to show me. It's like, it's very much the kind of journey through that, where you pass through and you see yourself in your true essence. But in order to see myself, I need to be able to see others too. It's a two-way street. I can't see myself if I don't allow myself to see others as well.
Beautiful. That's so true. That's so true. I use that phrase because one of the most, I'm thinking of, as you're speaking, other other experiences are also coming into my mind of through the body. I've been a horse rider most of my life, and I grew up with horses. And then I had a beautiful horse friend, companion, soul guide, right? As an adult. One of the things about horses is that, they bear the pain of our obsession with control, right?
Breaking a horse. Talk about a phrase I hate.
Yeah. So they're carrying the unconscious load of the human on their backs, and they're still trying to bring us into that beautiful, buoyant, fluid state of communication, that where every movement is graceful and alive and vibrant. And what my horse taught me, I could be here all day saying what my horse taught me. It's like spiritual teacher, right? He was chestnut with a lot of fire and an incredible heart. But when I first got him, I was quite young, and he was only 5 years old, and he had so much energy, and I was scared, right? Um, and so he got into this habit of bolting with me. And if you've ever ridden a horse, or anybody who's listening to this who's ever had that experience where there's nothing you can do, you're out, he's taken over, and he would just bolt. And the usual solution, of course, is to exercise more control, right? And I tried that for a while, and neither of us were very happy. And I could feel he wasn't very happy. And then I had this extraordinary moment where I knew he was just about to bolt. I could feel it. I could feel it. It was traveling through my body from his body, and it's instantaneous. I mean, words draw it out, but it was an instant knowledge. And somehow my body knew better than my training or my conditioning or my mind. And my body just relaxed completely. And I didn't tighten the reins, and I didn't, contract up. It was like I just went into this completely relaxed state. And he went, oh. And he like just relaxed too. And he'd never bolted again after that. Because what he'd been seeking from me was not control, but he'd been seeking communion, connection. And the moment he felt me give him that, our whole relationship shifted. And it was again one of those pivotal moments when life is teaching you directly, right?
And while there is so much to stay still, I want to take a very quick break to introduce one of our eco-conscious business partners. If you're on a journey of spiritual growth and personal transformation like I am, then you're going to love what I'm about to share. I want to introduce you to Gaia, a one of a kind streaming platform dedicated to expanding consciousness and exploring the mysteries of our universe. Gaia offers thousands of enlightening videos, from thought provoking documentaries and deep dive interviews to yoga and meditation classes that nurture your mind, body, and soul. Imagine diving into ancient wisdom with the Dalai Lama, exploring the depth of consciousness with Ram Dass, or healing with the insights of Matthias De Stefano or Joe Dispenza, all from the comfort of your home. Plus, you even find me on Gaia. Yep, that's it. I'm one of Gaia's featured experts. Whether you're seeking to connect with your inner self, understand alternative healing methods, or simply curious about the nature of reality, Gaia has you covered. With Gaia, you'll find community of like-minded individuals who are all seeking to grow, evolve, and make a positive impact on the world. It's more than just a streaming service. It's a gateway to more conscious and connected life. Ready to elevate your journey? Click on the link in the show notes to start your free trial today. Trust me, you won't want to miss the incredible content waiting for you on Gaia to support your evolving green brilliance.
Right?
Absolutely. And I find that that's actually, that connection
Mm.
is the core of so
Yeah.
many elements. I often say that, in my work, I don't try to teach, communication or I teach relationship. How do we enter
Exactly.
into relationship? And
Yeah.
it, I have been accused of being sometimes too nice because I give people a lot of space, because most people have not had a lot of space. Just like a lot of animals and a lot of plants, everything has been about control. Our human society, our Homo sapien tendency is
Mm.
that it's control, and
Mm.
control comes from fear. And so once
Mhm.
you, as you said, kind of recognize that that has all been fear-based teachings that have taught us that in a moment of fear, what do? Hold on. Like,
Yeah.
make find a way to control the space, control every aspect. If you're afraid that something's going to happen, then you have to triple check it and double check it. And so therefore, one, we disconnect from our body completely, because our body has a whole series of alarm systems and
Mhm.
understandings that are way beyond the way the mind thinks. And also we break the connection with everyone else, whether that's human or other kin, can alert us, right? Plants have defense mechanisms, animals have defense mechanisms. There's pheromones in the air and chemical signatures and all kinds of things that
Mhm.
we, of humans, have stopped receiving. That's why I was saying earlier that that whole idea of, let me see your fullness, let me see you
Mm.
completely. Isn't it in like Greek mythology, talking about stories that have those sparkles of truth, right? Greek mythology is many different Greek gods where they accidentally killed their human companions because the human companion said, "Show me your true essence." And as human
Mm.
beings, they weren't ready for that true essence. And I think that that's the case for many of us. Like, we are
Mm.
not always like prepared, because our control, to see the true essence of another being and allow that essence to kind of mix with mine and tell me, okay, how is this dance? How am I supposed to interact with you? Is it words? Is it movement? Is it, relaxation? Am I supposed to control things? Because sometimes control has its place, but we default to it because we're so
Mm.
afraid of like truly being seen, and therefore truly seeing others.
Mm. When you're seen by a wild animal, right? And I mean seen, right? And that's, again, as you said, that, we think of seen as purely being of the eyes, but of course it's not. It's your entire energetic field that is being directly perceived. And that's the power for me of these direct experiences with um, all the beings of nature. And when I speak from my experience, it does tend to be, the
Yeah,
animals,
of
because
course.
they're the ones that have come to me. But you're seen and you're known directly. So that surface that we have, which we need in everyday life, that personality, that's wiped away. And then it's eye to eye, and then it's heart to heart. And then that moment, and sometimes, when I think of creativity and I think of the immense creativity of nature, I think, how do you bring something truly new into the world? And what is truly new comes about through authentic meeting. And then there's, that flash that comes back and forth. And then something new is emerging into this field of earth, and I've had that experience a number of times. And I think it's something that we as humans inhabited much more fully than we do now. I think it's there in our interior knowing, and we've had to suppress it. And we've been really trained out of that ability to enter into the space of meeting, which is a sacred space of meeting.
I'm gonna put you on the spot for a second. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sorry, but I'm always so curious of this when I meet people like you with this this connection that has been thankfully, kind of reactivated.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think? I have a theory, I have my own theory, but why do you think we lost it?
Oh gosh, that's such a great, I mean, it's a heartbreaking question.
It is.
It's a really heartbreaking question. And because in losing it, we also lost our ability to truly relate to each other.
Agreed. Completely agree.
It's not just about, I mean, we speak about nature as somehow a separate dimension when it isn't. It's the very essence and expression of who we are. We express ourselves um, you know, through our embodied nature, and then we meet the others. So how did we lose it? It's really a good question. It's really an incredible question. There's a very old story that I told you that I was up in this northeastern Arctic corner of Russia among the Yupik. They're Eskimo. They're one of the Eskimo language groups, the Yupik people. And they had a very beautiful story. They hunt walruses and seals. They live from the ocean as well as fishing, obviously. But in this story, which is a creation story, that there was a young woman who loved to sing, and she had such a beautiful, beautiful voice, and she loved to walk on the tundra and sing to the plants, and so all these little dwarf willows and all the berries and the amazing lichens and all this like magically colored land that she walked on, she sang to everything. And the plants loved to hear her voice, and even the stones would string to vibrate when she sang. And she was walking along the shore one day and she was singing, and a great whale swimming far out to sea heard her voice because it came to him on the wind and it came resonating through the ocean. And the whale had never heard anything as beautiful as this song before. And so he came closer and closer and closer to the shore until he could stand up on his tail as whales do and look, and he saw her. And he heard her and he saw her. And he was filled with so much love and wonder for this being that he actually cast himself onto the shore, where he was magically transformed into the shape of a very beautiful young man. And so this couple, of course, loved each other very, very deeply, and they lived together, and they had children. And sometimes their children were in human form, and sometimes their children came as tiny little whales that grew inside the lagoons that indented all this shoreline. And over many, many years, their children had other children, and the people spread along the shore. And they had enormous wisdom of the sea from their father and wisdom of the tundra from their mother. And they knew that there was one thing they must never do, and that was to kill the whales that they could see, because the whales were truly their brothers and their sisters. And as long as they obeyed that, they lived in harmony. But there was one hunter who thought that he was stronger and cleverer and quicker than anybody else. And he wanted to show how powerful he was. And so he went out with his harpoon and with the lance, and he killed one of the whales that were breathing and singing, and brought the body, drew it back onto the shore. And then he went and he said, "Look, it's only bone and flesh, nothing else." And his ancestor, the singer of the tundra, who lived and merged in love with the spirit of the whale, came to him and she said, "One day you'll remember, you'll know." So it was vanity of being separate and special and more powerful. And that story, which is an amazing story to come from a hunting culture, is really about how we lose that when we think of ourselves as having, we want to make ourselves bigger, mm, more, we want to, yeah, we want to be the ones who have the dominance.
And I think another piece of that story that sometimes many cultures have very similar stories. I think there's
Mm,
two elements, and there's one in particular that I think we forget about, and maybe, I don't know, maybe it sort of in the end distorts our way of looking at stories like that, which is, there's the part of the kind of, we call it sort of the enemy within here in Dom and Her, right? That aspect of me that always wants to be special. And
yeah,
not
exactly.
special in the I'm special for myself and you're special in your
Yeah,
way and you're all special
yeah,
in your own
yeah.
way, but in the I want to be more special than everybody
Than
else.
you.
And
Yeah, than
exactly.
you.
And we think of that as like kind of the anti-evolution. It's the
Yeah.
one that says, I want everybody behind me, therefore I have to stop your evolution in order for
Mm,
me to be at the top of that pyramid. And
mm,
so I don't want anybody else or anything else to evolve, to grow, to continue to move forward, because the only thing that can be in the forward is me. And so it's kind of like this we call it the anti-life principle. It's the one that
mhm,
doesn't want life to continue to unfold. And I think in stories like this, we see that part usually really clear, right? That's the moral,
mm,
that whatever. The part that we forget in it is, for example, and is the fact that there's this circle of life, and there is this circle of life that we continuously sacrifice ourselves for one another. Not in the I'm going to throw myself against, a harpoon for you. That's one way. But I mean more in the some animals and some plants know
mhm,
that they are food. Some
mhm,
know that might happen to them. And there's this whole mechanism of play, of roughhousing, of getting myself ready, of also giving of myself.
mhm,
And I think that sometimes we tell the stories of like, here's the person that went out of control, which I think is still important because we're seeing examples of it all over the place. So we haven't learned that
mm,
lesson. But I think we've also forgotten the lesson of being part of a collective, being part of a whole, also means sacrificing parts of yourself. And that doesn't mean that makes me any less. It's instead, like we know from like the Tiferet principle, right? It's the
mhm,
most beautiful thing you could do.
mhm,
I find absolute beauty in the balance of everything, which means looking and finding the parts of myself that excel, but also allowing myself to sort of smooth my rough edges, sacrifice little pieces of myself to complete a greater picture of a whole. And that's what makes beauty, right?
absolutely.
And
Yeah.
and I find that that piece of the natural story sometimes gets lost, where it's, in the argument, I actually was arguing with a vegan on a social network the other day, and I didn't really want to, but I'm
Mm,
just tired also of people giving me absolute answers.
yeah, yeah.
The world doesn't work on absolute answers, unfortunately. It just doesn't. And we need to find the places where I'm okay with, here in Dominher, for example, I often tell people when I go to other countries and I teach about being a community, and they're like, what are some of the things that are the gotchas of being in a community? And I'm like, the biggest gotcha is the fact that I have to sacrifice things. But when I do it, I feel so empowered and I feel
Mhm,
happy. Like if you invite me to a super cool concert, on a day that it's my turn to cook dinner for my house and there's nobody else who can do it because I can't find a change, I'm going to cook dinner. The other night I was supposed to teach. Somebody invited me to teach in a super cool class. It was my day to take the instruments of our, what we call our nial, who are the people in charge of the social side of Damanhur. It was the instruments, which are the magical instruments. And as a knight, once every 3 months, I have to take them to the oracle. And it was like, it's my turn. And the person was like, well, just find a change. And I'm like, no, like, it's my turn. Like, it's my responsibility. And take it very, like, it's strong. It's important. It's part of what creates the fabric, the magical fabric of my community. Like, no, I'm not just going to find a change. Like, it's not worth it to me, because me being, there in support of those instruments, in support of, this process, this whole, ritual, for me brings a level of completeness to the overall project that I'm in my community. And therefore I'm not going to give that up. And that's the same way of, like, I even said to this person, this vegan that I was having a discussion with, where I said, to her, I'm like, I only wish it was more legal, like it was legal where I live, to just take my body and throw it into a hole at the end of my life and let me nourish, soil and
Other life.
insects and all the other animals in the woods. Like, I wish that they could just tear me apart at the very end and eat me and get total nourishment from me. Like, I would gladly do that and be a part of it, if that means, nourishing a whole cycle of life. And I feel like I think we need to find more of that mythology, more of that story, where it's, I didn't, give away something of myself and get lost, but more of, this is what I have, what everybody is putting in order for us to have our completeness. And I think that that's what you see when you really see an other kin, like a not a more than human being. You see that because they know that they're equally food, they're equally shelter, they're equally nourishment, they're equally, being nourished, they're equally giving, they're equally taking. Like, it's all happening at the same time. And we've thrown ourselves out of that balance. And you just look and you're like, oh, wow. And you do it all without being totally stressed out. Like,
Absolutely. I mean, there is no landscape, no true landscape with. I hate the word predator because it's loaded with negativity.
exactly.
I pray. How pathetic is that? Have you ever seen an elk like dance? Like, say,
Exactly.
here I am, and proclaim their vigor. They're not prey. They are participants in the dance that you've just described
Right.
with the mountain lion and with the wolf. And through that dance, they assert who they are. So I don't have another word for predator and prey, but it's what you've just said. It's fundamentally
Absolutely.
misunderstanding
We
that
call
dance
it
of
the
relation.
missing archetypes. They're the
Yeah.
archetypes of relationship that we have either mislabeled to the point where we've lost them. And predator and
Mhm.
prey are two fundamental ones, like the idea
Mhm.
that we all have predator tendencies and they're not always
Mhm.
bad. We all have
No.
parasitic tendencies and they're not all bad. They have to be used in the right context, in the right amount, at the right
Mhm.
moment.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. That's no, the judgments that we place are, yeah, there's no relationship, no true relationship where you're projecting your narrow understanding of who that being is. And I had a wonderful friend, I mean, just magical friend, and I worked with in Georgia, and he was and is a highly qualified scientist and a lover of wolves. And this man, his relationship with wolves was so extraordinary that he'd actually shared his life with a wolf pack for a
Wow.
certain time. He had become integrated into the life of this wolf pack. As he told me, he said, I was young at the time. I was very strong. So he went in, this is what he did. He went and over a period of months, he became part of their life. And one of the things he said to me is, our whole relationship changed when I started helping them to hunt. He said, I closed off an escape route for the deer that they were chasing. And he said they were so excited because they understood not only what I'd done, but why I'd done it. And so he was working with them. And I think this is very ancient in humans. I think we have this very ancient bond with wolves where we understand each other, and we understand each other within that flow of life that, you've just described. And so he said, after that, our relationship became very close, and I mean, I've written about it in my book, actually, because I spent time with him, and I saw him with wolves, and he was somebody that it was like this energy in his body. Sometimes when he would describe the wolves, it was like the wolf spirit actually entered his body. And what he was, and it's very interesting, how we learn through somebody who has very deeply integrated knowledge into themselves, because it passes to you directly
Mhm.
and not through the conceptual mind. And so he would speak to me about wolves and his experience and wolf behavior, and the wolf was present, right? You know what I
I
mean?
totally know what you mean. I
It
completely know
was
what you
not
mean.
just two human beings talking to each other. The wolf became present
Mhm.
between us, within us. And so we were able to actually, and it's a magic when that happens, when you're this communication that we've been speaking about really all through this conversation, the
Mhm.
magic of communication that is not mediated by the narrow concepts of the mind.
I love that, and I love when you reach that point. I'm a
Yeah,
as you can tell, I love deep conversations. That's
yeah,
probably one of the most beautiful things of having a podcast is that you can, put
yeah.
together these
So,
you have
yeah.
excuses for it, but I am the kind
Mhm.
that, like, my girlfriends and I leave each other 15-minute, voice messages that are super deep, like going into our emotions or going into whatever is
Yeah,
happening, and I do agree, and it's such a beautiful thing when that mind piece clicks
yeah,
off and all of a sudden there's an embodiment that's talking to
yeah.
you. And it could still come out in words, but you're
Mhm,
almost not even hearing the words because you're feeling the
mhm,
impact. And this
mhm,
happens even again across multiple, I mean, for us, for voice messages or whatever, but I remember the first time I saw it in a completely different context that was like somebody with music who,
mhm.
you see this when you see a musician that gets lost in, and all of a sudden the music is communicating almost as an entity in and of itself. The
Yeah,
person
yeah.
has moved out,
Mhm.
and you see it, as you said, when there's like a deep communication with a person who has embodied the spirit of other kin, of an animal, of a plant, like, and to me, that is, again, that beautiful place of communion. That is what we're all striving for, is I
Mhm,
wanna feel those parts of myself. I wanna feel my inner animalness, my inner plantness. I wanna
mhm,
feel my divineness. I wanna feel my connection to the vibrations of the world, to the music of the spheres, like, I want that's that whole mystical thing that we, was talking about, is when we step out and we go into the mysticism of embodiment that goes beyond. And sometimes it still passes through words, but oftentimes it doesn't. And even the words are coming out, that's not what you're really receiving. That's my favorite space in the world. My favorite, favorite,
absolutely.
favorite space in the world.
Yeah.
I'd love, like, as we're getting up to our kind of like wrap up here, even though I know, as usual, we could go for hours. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your book. Tell everybody about your book.
Yeah, with pleasure. So I, I realized that, I've been traveling and meeting quite extraordinary people and in connection with the animals. And that wonderful man I've just described, his name is Jason Badritsa, Georgian Russian. Um, it was something that I was it was like a hidden stream in human awareness, this ability to have the direct connection with wild animals. And I was learning about it, from from these highly experienced and highly qualified scientists who are working outside of the mainstream Western model of thinking, right? They weren't just watching animals and noting down, different, observed varieties of behavior. They were engaging with them directly, right? They were being one scientist told me when he walked among polar bears without a weapon and without fear, because he was an animal among other animals and he was communicating with them directly, and he never had a problem with the bears, except once when it was his own fault. And that was on a remote high Arctic island where the polar bears come into land during the summer melt season. So I was meeting these people, and they were telling me something about our original human ability to communicate with the natural world. And so I started writing about it, and then it became it took me into that deep level within myself that was really calling out to express what you've just said, that we call it mystical because it's taking you further out of your narrow, confinement within the mind and the thought forms and the beliefs into this expansiveness. So it's called Eyes of the Wild because it's fundamentally about that deep gaze of recognition, of eye to eye, heart to heart, with the whale, with the wolf, with bears, with horses, wild horses as well. I've ridden among wild horses. And it's been the greatest joy of my life, really.
How do we get the book?
Well, it's available on different, certainly on Amazon, and I'll give you the link. And
Yes.
yeah,
We will
it
put it into the show notes,
that would be
along
lovely.
with, of course, your website and how people
Yeah,
can contact you and find out more about the amazing things that you're doing.
I would be very, very pleased. Yeah, yeah,
We're also modest. She's like, the book is this, the book is that. Yes, but where do we get it? That's what we want to know. We want to know how we put it in our hands and we can have that experience ourselves.
yeah. And the book, sorry, the book is also about how this. I mean, I say changes you, but actually, no, it takes you back to who you really are. These
That's it.
encounters
That's
with.
it. That's why we use it's funny when I came to Damanhur, so we've had to, we translate a lot of words. And one of the
Mhm.
words we've always talked about in Damanhur is, our job is il risveglio dell'umanità, which in reality translates literally to awakening. And I was
Yeah,
one of the first people that was like translating things into, not the first, but one of the first people that was translating things into English on a massive scale for Damanhur.
yeah,
And I was like, "Honey, we're not awakening, we're reawakening." Like,
yeah.
we were awake, we know this, and part of our path is to reawaken to the fact that because that's where the familiarness comes from. If we were never awake, then we wouldn't almost know when
Mhm,
we get there, and
mhm.
in order for us to complete a cycle that we're on, it's a reawakening. We've been there before. We've entered into it. We'll do it at a new level. We'll be even more evolved, more advanced. There's be so many different things, but it's a reawakening. Like, we were there once, folks. You've all been there. Like, tap deep inside of yourself because the memory of that stuff is all
It's
in there.
all there. And this is where all the fun things are. This is where all the joy and the good things live.
Exactly. So you just got to kind of like connect into that. And sometimes you're going to do it with the help of others. Actually, you're always going to do it with the help of others. The help of others is a fundamental piece with it. Eleanor, I cannot thank you enough for this conversation. I am just in awe and humbled by your experiences, but also it's it makes me so happy every time I have these conversations to see,
Yeah,
like, we are there, we're getting there, like, we're seeing
yeah.
it, we feel it, and how important it is for us to get it out so that others can feel it, that others can move in these directions and can really have these types of experiences. So thank you so much for this conversation. I am, just like I
It
said,
was
deeply
great
grateful.
fun.
Yeah, and
Good
for
fun.
those of you that are listening, everything about Eleanor's work and who she is and how to find her and how to buy her book are all going to be in the show notes. And of course, if you want to continue these types of conversations, the Naturally Conscious Community is your place for human-plant relationships and really relationships between humans and other kin in general, for all the reasons that we just talked about today, because that is pretty much every event that happens in there, from the book club to the Sprouts Writing and and Creativity group, the mini voyage with plants, everything that's in there, and especially our plant-inspired masterclass discussions, which are pretty deep dives into these types of things, are all to help support you evolve and reawaken. And if you are looking for one-on-one support to get there, then I'm always here for you. All you have to do is reach out. So with that, thank you so much for being here. And remember to resist the urge to hold back your evolving green brilliance. Bye. Bye. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Reconnect with Plant Wisdom. To continue these conversations, join us in the Naturally Conscious Community, your premier online ecosystem for plant reawakening and accelerated evolution and co-creation with other kin. Here, you'll find expansive discussions, interactive courses, live events, and supportive group programs like the Plant Wisdom Book Club and the Sprouts Writing and Creativity Group. Connect with like-minded individuals collaborating with plants to integrate these insights into life. Intro and outro music by Steve Shuley and Poinsettia from The Singing Life of Plants. That's it for me, Tigria Gardenia, and my plant collaborators. Until next time, remember, resist the urge to hold back your emerging green brilliance. I'm out. Bye.